Our first speaker this morning is Richard Dauenhauer.
My presentation this morning that's on the program is not going to take terribly long, so we're, as Andy said, we'll hope to take a break sometime and see some of the houses here. And what I wanted to talk about, this thing about hearing Tlingit sounds, is Tlingit is a very, very difficult language, and those of us who are struggling with it, I keep saying this, and some of the folks don't seem to believe it, but if you were born speaking Tlingit, if you already speak it, rejoice and be happy, because that's the easiest way to get it and probably the only way that you're ultimately going to get it, because it's something that if you don't learn at home from your parents, it's very, very, very difficult to acquire this. But the rest of us kind of work away at it, and as Jeff mentioned yesterday, he's been working on it for something like 20 years, and I've been at it for about 25 years, and I'm by no means fluent. I wish I were. But one of the things that we're experiencing now is this great interest among the younger people of working on names, of documenting their personal names, documenting place names. And we think this is really beautiful. But there are going to be some problems with this, namely that Tlingit is so much more difficult than English. And for starters, and what I'll talk about a little bit this morning, Tlingit has maybe, depending on how you count, 30 sounds that English doesn't have, just for starters. Now, you all know that English has got certain sounds that Tlingit doesn't have, and like the classic one is the NG. English has got this word sing, and it's the difference between sin and sing. And I always like to use this when I approach the Raven ladies, and you say, "Come to church now and sin with me," and so anyhow. But Tlingit is just that way for those of us who are coming at it from English. We've got like 30 sounds that Tlingit has that we just have trouble hearing. And this is also true for younger people whose first language is English. So what I've done, and I don't have probably enough for everybody in the room, but maybe if you can share these, and you're welcome to just copy them to your heart's content. I'll send these around the different sides of the room here. Oops. This is a chart. Just kind of look on with folks. Says, hey, there's probably only about 30 copies, and there's more people in the room. But if you can share it, and then you're welcome to Xerox it. What we did, we just took the sounds of Tlingit and we put them on a big piece of paper, and then we shaded in a darker color the ones that are not found in English. And then we shaded in a little lighter color the words that are sometimes in English but sometimes not. And if you look at the chart, then there's an awful lot of shaded area, and you can kind of begin to count up. What are these sounds that are just they don't exist in English? And we kind of like the idea of a chart because it's like boating, that it's an awful lot easier when you're out in your boat to have a chart and you know where the reefs are than to discover them the hard way. And so this is a sound chart. It's sort of like floating on the ocean of sound here. And on the back side of this is the hardest area of all. And there are what we call the K and the X sounds, and those of you who've dealt with spelling Tlingit are certainly familiar with this. But here again are all of these sounds. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 20 sounds, and of these 20 sounds, 2 of them are shared with English, K and a G. Also, sometimes people will tell you that Tlingit is like German. Well, we went to the trouble of circling the only 2 sounds that are like German. They've got a circle around. So if you're a German, you've got 2 sounds up. So out of 20 sounds, if you speak German, you only have to learn 16. If you speak English, you have to learn 18. So this is why it's hard, and that's the main reason we kind of do the chart, is that people say, my goodness, I didn't know that, So it's not just that you're out there struggling without knowing, but it's like the reef. So here's all of these other sounds. And basically, that's the chart. So then it's like boating. You know, it takes you the rest of your life to know how to get in the boat and go and find the fish that are out there. So anyhow, these are with difficulty. And so this happens in fact, I'll tell you a little funny story here, seeing as we have some time. A lot of you know A.P. Johnson, who was one of our earlier teachers, and so I was working through some of these sounds, and I can't remember, what's the word for eyebrows is one that comes to my mind. What's that in Tlingit, eyebrows? So there's a word that begins with walk, eyelashes. What's it? That's the one. Eyelashes. Okay. So I was trying to say eyelashes. I mixed up with eyebrows, and I said, well, you know, kind of looking for some sign of recognition. Am I doing all right? And you know how AP was always very low key in the humor, and he says, well, at least you don't make faces at me when you speak Tlingit. So. Believe me, this is where the faces come from, because we're trying, all of us, to make, you know, what is this, and all of this kind of stuff. So what does this mean? This is why are we spending some time on this morning? Probably the most important thing is when we're learning names from the elders, or people will go and say, what is my Tlingit name? If it has any of these sounds, it's going to be a little bit hard to hear the first time around. So we're just encouraging folks to know that this is the reef, this is where some of the problems lie. And one thing that's very helpful is to tape record it, because then you can play it over later. You can have somebody help you to write it out, and then you can begin to work on the sounds, because this takes years and years. There's some languages that you can learn the sounds almost overnight. You know, like Japanese is not all that difficult for sounds. It's difficult to write. Tlingit may take you years and years and years just to learn the sounds. So as I say, if you grew up with it as a baby, be happy, because it doesn't come easy as an adult. And the reason, again, that we wanted to spend some time doing this is at Sea Alaska Heritage Foundation, this is one of the most common requests we get by telephone. We have people calling up all the time wanting to know, you know, what their Tlingit name is, or my name is such and such, how do I pronounce it? And so we very often have to say, well, is there anybody, do you know anybody in your family that we could talk to that might know the name or might know how to pronounce it? So we really urge all of you who are working with these, or any of the elders, you know, try to take the time to do it on the tape recorder and kind of explain it, you know, say it slowly and explain the meaning and all of that, because it's something that's just very, very valuable. And as I say, it doesn't come easy to those of us who are certainly, not only myself, say, coming in from the outside, but people who are Tlingit, who are working to learn these. And any of you in the room who are Tlingit teachers will tell you it takes a while too. And these are the things that, you know, it just doesn't come overnight on the sounds. Now, what happens on these? Let's take, for example, this one on the backside. These are all of these 20, what we call the K and X sounds, of which 18 don't exist in English. What's going to happen is they'll go people will hear them as the nearest English sound, which is going to be G or K. And so you'll find, we have a mosquito trying to attack me here. Then you'll find that, say a sound like Yutki, that will come up in a lot of the songs will become a K. So it'll be Yutki or Yutki or something like, you know. So these are the things to hear about. So when you notice the difference between, say, the people, you know, if you're teaching the people to sing the songs and you end up hearing a lot of Ks where you don't think they should be, this is why, because it's the only sound of all these 20 that's shared with English. So these are the places just to work on. So it just takes a little extra time, and you have to kind of repeat. And we found, too, that once people realize this, then it's no trouble hearing. You know, you can say, yeah, there's all these different sounds, and it's this one, this one, this one, this one. And they can go on and hear them. That's really all of that technical thing. We can talk more about this later. But we just wanted to share that with you, and while we had the audience. What I'd like to do also is a couple of things, seeing as we do have some time just to take advantage of the audience here and do a little show and tell. And that's of the two books that we produced at the Heritage Foundation. And these will be, we brought some of them along. They're down at the is it American Legion Hall or the VFW Hall in town. And we can also, you can get these through mail order. But I'd like to give a little guided tour, because a lot of times there's a certain confusion about the books and why we do them. When we first started working on this material over 20 years ago, the biggest complaint we had from the elders was they would look at books and say, that's not a Tlingit story, or that's not the story I told them. And everything that was important to the elders as a Tlingit tradition bearer were not in the books. You didn't know who the storyteller was. You didn't know who the clans were that were associated with it. You didn't know when the person told it. You just had this story sort of coming out of nowhere. And so we asked the elders, well, what would you like to do? And they said, tell the story the way we told it. We said, well, okay, that makes perfectly good sense. So the process is that Nora worked with the elders, and we're still, of course, doing this, who tell the story, first of all, in Tlingit. Then Nora transcribes it in Tlingit. We write it out in Tlingit, and then usually read it back if we can. Sometimes you can't do this because of distance, or sometimes the people we've worked with have passed on, and it's difficult. But usually go back and read it to them and say, I'll make any corrections, and then translate it, so that the book then ends up with Tlingit on one page and in English on the other page. And you can use this, you can read it in Tlingit, or you can read it in English. If you're a Tlingit speaker and want to learn English, you can learn it if you're an English speaker and you want to learn Tlingit, you can read it that way. But the main thing is it lets you read the story the way the elders told it. Then the next part of the book that you all know is when people tell you a story, very often they change depending on who's in the room and how much you know. So very often, the more you know, the less the storyteller tells you, because they don't want to insult your intelligence. The least you know, the less you know, the more the storyteller tells you. So sometimes, you get different information, because you can look out and say, well, gee, I better explain more because, the people don't know that, or maybe I don't need to explain that because the people do know that. So we tried in the notes to explain some of the things that may not make sense if you weren't right there at the storytelling. And then the part of the book that we enjoyed the most was at the very end, doing the biography section. So that, for example, I just open here, this is Susie James from Sitka, who told one of the stories, and we have her photograph and life story as much as we could put it together. So there's all of the different people in here, Frank Johnson again, so that for each of the storytellers, there's their picture, their life story, their name in Tlingit, as much as we could put in of their life story. This is really world-class literature, and we believe that it holds its own with everything else that's going on in schools and universities, and I think that's the beauty of what's here, and it's the elders. So all that we have tried to do here is like being a microphone for the voice of the elders, and we've been very happy with all of the people who've worked with us. The second book that we did was speeches. This one is stories, and the second one is speeches. And in here we have three different groups of speeches. The first section are speeches from here and there and different occasions. Some of them are right here in Klukwan. We have speeches by Jenny Tlingit and others that were delivered right here, others from Haynes. The oldest sound recording of Tlingit that we know of, we have a transcription. It's on wax cylinder. It was collected in 1899 in Sitka on a wax cylinder by the Harriman expedition. And we found out about these. There's kind of a funny story. Somebody found these in the archives, and they took them and played them to Mike Krause at a conference of linguists. And they said to Krause, hey, we've got some EOC stuff for you. And he played it, and he said, it doesn't sound like EOC. And he said, well, with a wax cylinder, you don't know which way they go. Sometimes whether they go this way or that way. Mike says, well, play it backwards. So they played it backwards. He says, it's Tlingit. And so Mike says, well, they've always said that EOC is just Tlingit pronounced backwards. But anyhow, they discovered this, and so these are these wax cylinders, and there were 3 of them from 1899 that were on a little cassette recording. 2 of them were clear enough to transcribe, and Nora transcribed them. The 3rd one was just too damaged, too much crackling. But the language, it's like from another century. Here you have a person's voice, and we don't know who the speakers were. We can guess because they mention their relatives and their crests and so on. But anyhow, there are different speeches in here from different places. The center of the book are a set of speeches from Hoona from 1968, from the memorial for Nora's father's brother, and David Kadashan, Jesse Dalton, people like that. The 3rd set of speeches is very special to us also, and it's from Sitka in the 1980. And the students from the Sitka Native Education Program tape recorded this, and it begins with Charlie Joseph presenting the dancers, and then the elders in the audience responding to this and explaining why the audience response is so important in Tlingit tradition, and that when people sing songs and bring out regalia, that this is like inviting spirits, and the same way that you invite somebody to your house, you don't ignore them. When these spirits are invoked, it's very important for other people to invite to balance these out, and the elders explain this in great detail. And again, all of the speeches here. Now, this book, we have a longer introduction, and in the speeches, very often people will mention the different regalia that they have, the atu, maybe hats, maybe blankets, and so forth. And so we have, the photographs of that and how it works together. And then finally, the introduction, or the notes. This particular book has also, for those of you who are interested in learning Tlingit, there's a glossary, which is a small dictionary that goes with one of the sets of speeches. So if you're a student of the language and you're trying to understand it, every word in the speeches is explained. So you can use the masters of Tlingit Oratory. There's Matthew Lawrence, William Johnson, David Kadashan, Jesse Dalton, Austin Hammond. They're all the speeches in here, and then it's all explained. And then finally, at the end, the biographies. This book, we ended up with 300 pages of biography, and it was too long, so we limited everybody to 2 pages. I just happened to open to the one here with Jimmy George and Lydia George. This is from Cake in 1970s, early 70s, at the raising of the totem pole, where he gave a speech. So anyhow, I just wanted to kind of give you the guided tour through this, and just to show you by way of what we've been working on over the last years, and to say this would not be possible without the help and the encouragement of all the elders who've helped us, who've shared the stories. And for us, it's been a very moving experience just to work with it. We've learned so much, and it's been very gratifying to us too, as the books come into use with the younger people using them, and that's been very moving to us. And Sitka, especially, I mentioned last week when one of the young men was actually reading the Tlingit to us, and it was really beautiful. We read in Portland, Oregon, a couple of years ago, and a young girl came out of the audience and said, "My grandmother died before I was born," and that's her story. And this is just so moving to hear this and to make contact again. That's all that I have of my grandmother. So we're finding things like this, and to us, it's very very moving. So we want to thank again publicly all of the elders with whom we've worked, many of whom have passed on and are no longer with us. And we can only apologize for our lack of human strength and energy. I wish we could work 24 hours a day on this, because there's so much more to do. But we're also very open to working with anybody who would like to do that. It all depends on the elders and the clans and the communities of what people would like to see go into print. Certainly there's some risk involved in this. There's the fear, then there's always the possibility of maybe people not taking it in the right way. But on the other hand, there's also the beauty of it, and it's so beautiful when you see that these are passed on, and people are just moved. We've had people in tears all around the world at the Oratory, and they say a lot of times, I never understood what was going on. I just didn't understand, but now that they can understand. So thank you again, and I have two other handouts here that I didn't circulate around, but we'll just leave them on the table later. It's more on the sounds. A little bit about some of the difficulties, and one is on a technical sound chart, but it's just for folks that want them.
Besides the beginning Tlingit change that you have in the books that you mentioned, do you have any other that you're working on that?
I'll tell you what we have. We also at the Heritage Foundation started a mail order business, because we know that books are sometimes hard to get in the communities. So what we have for Tlingit is the noun dictionary by nation story that was revised by Jeff Lear and Henry Davis. We have the verb dictionary by nation story. We have our spelling book and beginning Tlingit, and then these two books. We also have for Haida and for Tsimshian, some materials that are available. For Tsimshian is a big 2-volume set of stories. It costs about $40. It's extremely difficult to get a hold of. It's published by the Canadian Museum in Ottawa, and we're always having, we keep selling them. We order 5, we sell. We order 10, we sell 10. We order 20, we sell 20. We just can't keep them in stock. What we would like to do is to reprint for Tsimshian. There is a grammar and a dictionary that are long out of print. We're hoping to get money to reprint those. For Haida also, there is a dictionary that's out of print that we hope to expand and to reprint. And then there's some other materials. These are for sale, by the way, down at the, is it the Legion? The trade fair at the Legion Hall, American Legion Hall. We also have a catalog. We can mail you anything. So just if we run out, we didn't bring unlimited supplies. So we do have a catalog of everything that we have. Yes, what we are working on now is, as I mentioned, for this book, we had like 300 pages of biography because people were really excited about it. So we have a book of Tlingit biographies. There's also one Tsimshian in there, Peter Simpson. And we expanded. Andy Hope, years and years ago, did a little booklet on the founders of the Alaska Native Brotherhood. So we ripped that off, and with Andy's blessings. And so we have this thing in the founders. This thing keeps going on and on and on, by the way. And so we have up now 45 biographies. And this is really, I'll tell a little funny story about my brother-in-law, Austin Hammond, because every time I go back to Austin to check if this is right, he'd give me more information. So, I go back home and type it up. I come back and say, well, is this right? He get more information. I said, I got to stop going up to see this guy because it's going to, But then what happened, and this is very typical of the stuff that Sergei was mentioning and what happened here with this treaty. When I was back in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., I found a whole bunch of documents that dealt with Haines and Klukwan. And these were documents that were signed by Tlingit, by Dauenhauer, all of the old names that are still circulating. And we have letters. Some of these are called these, I don't know what you would call them, sort of nice guy letters, like saying, this guy's a nice guy, he's okay, pay him more money and give him less to carry when you're going through. And others are more serious, like they may be the treaties like this, or we have letters from the governor of Alaska at the time, Swinford. And then other documents were actually in Raven House. I'm sure, again, in your clan collections, there may be really priceless, valuable documents. And by taking these and then going with the genealogies of the elders, where they'll give their oral history, you can match up. And we can do this also, like as Sergei mentioned, with the Russian church documents, with the oral histories, and sometimes we can go back, like 9 or 10 generations with certain people's family trees by the knowledge that people have, and then by going through the documents, the baptismal records, and the church records. Anyhow, this is why this biography book, we're getting kind of sick of it now because it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. In the meantime, we keep getting poorer and poorer and poorer. We're trying to get money to publish it, and the Humanities Forum turned us down. It sounds like Andy's litany here. Everybody we go to for money, they turned it down. But finally, University of Washington Press is very excited about it. They think that it's going to be a good book. And again, we certainly encourage folks. I have a list of the table of contents, and if people have information, we've tried to get back to the families. And that's another thing that you can do. Again, well, it's so much easier to do things while people are alive than when they've passed on. The only problem is, as you know, it's sort of bad manners in Tlingit to talk about yourself. But when you're trying to get somebody's life story, it's hard because you say, well, tell me about yourself. Nothing, not much, and so then what do you do? I mean, it's like asking somebody to be bad manners. And one of our cutest stories in there is Charlie Joseph, he's the interview with Bill Brady, and he says, well, you asked for this, you asking me to do this. And it was beautiful because he was willing to do this. And one of the other elders, too, that's no longer alive was saying, well, okay, I'll do this. We realize we're asking you it's bad manners, but we really want to know about your life. And so it's a little bit of a bind because, and I think you'll all appreciate that. So the information is something that people are interested in. The younger people find the lives fascinating, but it's kind of a bad manners to beat your own drum. So the trick is to find somebody who could tell all about you and do it right. And but it makes it really hard to do a biography book because you want all the information, but it's hard to get that. But anyhow, the last thing we're doing now is going through historical photographs, and that's just fascinating to the old, especially for places that where people went and took pictures like Klukwan. So there's the pictures from 4 Mile from the 19th century, and a lot of the old photographs. So we're trying to identify people. And that's another thing, again, that doesn't require very much money that you can do locally. Just get those old photos out and identify them. Who are the people in there? And it's a lot easier to do now than it is 20 years or 30 years from now, too. And you can get photocopies done fairly easily now. You can make prints right from negatives. They do this in Juneau and a lot of other places, too. So those are projects that people can do right at home. Two other projects that we've had going for years and years. One is Raven Stories. We're still have that in the background. Another book that we would like to do that's a little more controversial, but this is, I think, a time at clan conferences to talk about. And that's the whole encounters between the Tlingits and the Russians. And we have, in the Russian side, a lot of documents, especially now since the end of the Soviet Union. There are documents that have been over there for over 100 years that nobody could get at, that were just locked up. And now for the first time, Sergei showed yesterday the book by Grinyov on the Tlingit Indians. There are young Russian scholars who are getting into these archives, and the end of that book has 35 documents or 35 pages of documents that were never published in any language. We have also handwritten things that have never been published from testimonies of people that, like one young man, Philip Kashivanov, who used to go between Sitka and Yakutat and Kodiak in the late 1700s. Another story that's never been translated, the taking of hostages was very complicated, and usually people would exchange. So, for example, Baranov would take some of the people of status in the Tlingit community. He would also leave people of status with him. He left a lieutenant in Yakutat, and this guy went over the glacier with the Yakutat people up to the Copper River and back, and he wrote up his journey. And he had this travel journal. And it went into the Russian archives probably in 1805, and it's been sitting there ever since. And this guy found this, and this is exciting reading. I mean, here's a Russian lieutenant who went with the Yakutat people over the glacier and came back and wrote about it. So there's all of these things that are just really exciting. What of course is the most difficult side is to get the Tlingit side of it, and that's what we're very concerned about, because the other is world history. The Russian accounts. They're all there. They're in English, they're in German, they're in French, they're in Russian. What about the Tlingit side of the story? And that's what's so important. And as people mentioned earlier with the treaty and with others, we find when we do get the Tlingit oral account, how it matches up. And they're very moving passages where in the Russian logbooks, they'll say, well, on the afternoon of so-and-so, is Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock, we did such and such and such and such. In the Tlingit oral literature, it won't be pinpointed by time like that, but the same event will be there. And when they coincide, and so you know that you're getting reliable tradition on both ways. And one is coming down orally, and it's been handed down over the generations, and the other is through the literature. So those are some of the things that we're working on, and hopefully with good Lord willing, and with the help of the elders and all the people that have worked with us for many years, we'll continue as long as we can. Just say again, thank you for those of you who've supported the work, and we would love to work with anybody who would like to have that the material collected, written in Tlingit, translated. But we can only do it with the help and with the blessings of the people.